everybody. In this week's video, I thought it would be a fun time to play at the fears of every single NHL fan base and list out a reason why their team will not have a successful season. So for some teams, that's they won't win the Stanley Cup, and for some teams, it's not making the playoffs, it's not making the right moves, it's not rebuilding correctly. There's lots of different ways to say you can have a successful NHL season. So please don't take these as predictions. It's more just kind of playing into what we're all afraid could really happen this year for our team if the worst case scenario was to happen. So first in this list, Colorado Avalanche, and you will not win the Stanley Cup this year because Kadri will somehow find a way to get suspended in the conference finals. For the New York Rangers, first off, I want to say that I am annoyed at your quote-unquote rebuild, because a rebuild is supposed to be long and painful, and for you guys, it wasn't. That's just not fair to the rest of us who have to suffer. And so for that, I'm gonna be really mean here and say you're not gonna win the cup because Hank, he just doesn't have it in the tank anymore. That's right, I went after King Henry. For the Washington Capitals, I honestly couldn't think of a great reason for them other than that the playoffs are really difficult, and minus that 1 year, they're a team that's clearly struggled in them before. Ugh, the Boston Bruins. I am just so sick of Boston teams being good at things. Just stop it. And while I do expect them to be contenders this year, I don't think they're going to win it all because they went to Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. And to get to that point is extremely grueling. And then to get back to the Stanley Cup Final and win it the next year, especially given how difficult their division is and how tough the playoffs are, I think they're just gonna flame out. Next up, we have the Ottawa Senators, and this is quick because Melnick is still your owner. The Carolina Hurricanes. Your goaltending will not pan out the way it did last year, and you're gonna miss Dad just a little too much. The Columbus Blue Jackets. You went all in last year, lost a lot of key pieces, and now the competition is just too much. For the New Jersey Devils, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons here, but what I'm gonna go with is that Subban is overpriced and Simmons is injury prone, and you invested too much money into them. Oh, and maybe Taylor Hall gets traded. Things just fell apart real quick there, didn't they? For the New York Islanders, you probably think I'm gonna say something about Leonard, but honestly, I think Varlamov is going to be fine in front of your defense. The reason you will not have a successful season this year is because of your offense. Next up, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and this team should win the Stanley Cup, and that means they probably won't. The Philadelphia Flyers will have a season because Gritty can actually play hockey. The Pittsburgh Penguins will not win the Stanley Cup because they do not have the depth and speed that they once had when they won their Stanley Cups. Next up, the Buffalo Sabres. Ralph Krueger will not be able to bring in that winning culture this team so desperately needs. The Detroit Red Wings. Everybody has too much faith in Yzerman. In Tampa, he was able to build that team because one, it's Tampa, not Detroit, and two, because of the way the taxes work in Tampa, and he doesn't have that luxury in Detroit. So he will not be able to make as many great moves as everyone thinks that he can make. Next up, we have the Florida Panthers. You guys made a lot of moves this offseason, and I think what's gonna happen is you have the fan expectations all the way up here, and this team is gonna go Cleveland Browns on you guys, and the reality is gonna be down here. For the Montreal Canadiens, you fell just short of making the playoffs last year, and during the offseason, you didn't make the moves that needed to be made. You tried to with the offer sheet with Aho, and that didn't work out, so you still lack that center depth that you desperately need. For the Toronto Maple Leafs, you're going to have to face the Boston Bruins in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs again, and you will not be able to get that monkey off your back. Is that the expression? I think it is. What I'm trying to say is that you cannot beat the Boston Bruins in the playoffs. For the Chicago Blackhawks, Crawford is injury prone, and Leonard was only as good as he was because of the defensive system that was in front of him. And while yes, you did improve your defense this offseason, it is just not good enough. The Dallas Stars will not win the Stanley Cup because I picked them to do so, and I've jinxed you. The Edmonton Oilers will not have a successful season because you need more than 2 players to make up a hockey team. We have the Minnesota Wild here, and I don't know, this team is just, to me, a mess. You're not really bad enough to get a good draft pick, good enough to win the Stanley Cup. You're just like a hamster on a hamster wheel running to nowhere. Yeah, it's just not a fun time there, but hey! At least you guys got a puppy. The Nashville Predators. I think Nashville is strong enough to withstand the loss of PK, and I think the addition of Duchesne is amazing, and I don't want to take a stab at your PK again. So what I'm gonna go with here is that Pekka Rinne is a beast during the regular season, carries the team, wins lots of games for you guys, And then when the playoffs roll around, he can't be the guy that you need him to be. The St. Louis Blues will not repeat as Stanley Cup champions, despite the fact that they are essentially the same team, because let's face it, winning the Stanley Cup is extremely difficult, and the Stanley Cup hangover is a real thing. Next up, we have the Winnipeg Jets. This one's a little bit tough for me because last year and the year before, I thought they were building to become a Stanley Cup contender. And then during this offseason, they just lost so many players. And honestly, without replacing them, I just don't see them as a good enough team to win the Stanley Cup. For the Anaheim Ducks, this season will not be successful for you because halfway through, John Gibson just says, it. It really reminds me of Tony X and talking about the goalie just said it and left. But like, I could totally see Gibson just being done. He's too good for you guys. Up next, we have the Arizona Coyotes. Even Phil Kessel, who has played 774 consecutive games, catches the injury bug. The Calgary Flames, this year will not be a winner for you because when you get to the playoffs, everything will be working for you except your goaltending, which is a damn shame because in the playoffs last year, the only thing that was working for you is your goaltending. The LA Kings will not have a successful season because they are not able to move any of their older players or big contracts that they so desperately need to get rid of in order to really push that rebuild forward. The San Jose Sharks will not win the Stanley Cup this year because Erik Karlsson will not be able to stay healthy for a full season, and that just leaves a $12 million hole in your lineup. Next up, we have the Vancouver Canucks, who tried to rush their rebuild. I mean, come on, you have Miller, Ferland, Ben, Tyler Myers, all of these contracts. It's a team that should be contending, but you're still in the middle of a rebuild. Don't try to be the New York Rangers. All right, and the final team here, the Vegas Golden Knights. And this season, you're going to get less free Krispy Kreme donuts as a result of age catching up to Marc-Andre Fleury. You guys still get the free donuts when you get a shutout? So not only do you not win the Stanley Cup this year, but you get less free donuts? That is truly heartbreaking. All right, guys, that is it for this week's video. Please let me know the reason that you think that your team will not win the Stanley Cup or will not have a successful season this year. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, cheers to hockey.